Welcome to Morning Joe with Tom, with your host, Thomas Chappell. Get ready to listen to real-life stories from inspiring leaders who have overcome incredible challenges to rise to the occasion. If you're ready to add some pep to your morning with a new outlook on leadership, then grab your cup of coffee. It's time to be inspired. Here's your host, Thomas Chappell.
Hey, Kristen. Thank you for joining us today here on Morning Joe with Tom. How you doing today?
I'm so good. And I appreciate you having me. I'm really excited about what I have to share with your audience today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that you're going to share it too. So for the listeners, so that we know, we met through a good friend, two good friends actually of ours, Bob Thibodeau and Sean Mize. And Kristen was gracious enough to be a guest on the show here today. So, uh, I just asked that you hold her up and listen very closely to what she's got. So you can add back, have some value come out of it through it all. So, Kristen, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and how that you came to these models that you're going to talk to us about today?
Well, thanks, Tom. My business is helping other people be successful in their relationships. There's nothing that we undertake in life that doesn't require relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems today that there's so many breakdowns in so many areas. It doesn't matter what institution you look at, business, education, politics, religion, even marriages, the divorce rate. I mean, people do not know how to get along. And it's killing us. I mean, it's really killing us.
Yes.
Nothing that provides more heartache and struggle and difficulty and obstacles than our inability to get along with each other. So, having had plenty of these problems myself, I have been on a search to understand how to develop mindsets that allow us to get along with each other. And so today I want to talk about 10 saboteur mindsets, because I think if we understand how we're sabotaging our relationships, then we can go about putting a modulator on, like a rheostat, because the very thing that makes a mindset a saboteur is because it's gone off the rails and it has too much power. If they're properly modulated, those very same things that sabotage actually can build strength into our relationships. But we have to know which is which, and we have to see, I'm over here in the weeds. This is going to go south real fast. And when we recognize that, then boom, we can come back toward the center and meet people in the sweet spot of win-win relationships. That's another point I want to make, Tom, is 2024 is the year of win-win relationships. This idea that I can win and you can lose, and that's going to make a world that works for everybody. No, it's not like that. So we have to have the ability to have conversation and dialogue when we're trying to solve a problem so that we can come up with a win-win solution. And the people and the companies and the businesses that become win-win are the people and the companies and the businesses that are going to grow this year. And the rest, I think, they're in trouble. Let's face it. This marketplace is not forgiving.
Yeah, no. Well, with all that great knowledge, why don't you kick us off with number one there? What's our first one?
Number one is called the judge. Now, we cannot get away from judgment. Unfortunately, it is human nature to judge. Now, the question is that judgment going to create win-win and allow discernment? That's the good side of the judge, is being discerning. Okay. Or the other side, the bad side, the dark side of the judge is being hypercritical of self, life, and other people. So I have a great example for you. I thought it would be so cool if we could just talk about real life people that embodied these saboteurs. And our saboteur for the judge is Tiger Woods. Now, Tiger Woods had a very difficult father. Now, I don't know these people. I only know what's in the public domain about them. I want to be clear about that, but I want to use their life stories to provide interesting examples. So Tiger Woods was playing golf when he was just a tiny little boy. And of course, he had skills. Probably his father had skills. And between the skill and his father's relentless pursuit of winning, Tiger Woods became a champion at an early age. But look what happened to him. He won and won and won. And then this very quality of being exacting and paying attention to detail and building his skills and having a good work ethic went way to the out in the weeds where he felt like he could do anything, say anything, get away with anything, and his whole life crumbled. So this is what the judge can do to you when it's unchecked. Fortunately for him, once he destroyed his life, somehow, some way, he got help and in recovery. And now he's in 2019, I believe he made a huge comeback. And so now I think it's probably the case, I can't say for sure, that he has found a way to take this harsh critic judge and pull it back toward the center where he has high standards and he works hard, but he's not about winning at the expense of his relationships anymore.
Okay, cool.
So that's the judge. Should I keep going?
Right. Yeah, well, give us number 2.
Number 2 is the avoider. Now, avoiders are not so much like judges. Judges are willing to call it how they see it, and if you don't like it, that's your problem. Avoiders don't like conflict at all. So this is a very different kind of person than our saboteur. Let me get my notes in front of me here. An example of being an avoider, and this will be interesting for Star Trek fans, is George Lucas. George Lucas is the creator of the Star Trek franchise. And as we know, those first 3 Star Trek movies were out of this world, literally. Little pun there for you, Tom. And so he was very, very successful. But when you look behind the scenes with George Lucas, you see him trying hard to please everybody and not go too far and keeping, he was an innovator, and yet he was trying to avoid conflict and criticism. And so after the first 3 were so successful, we really began to see him pulling back, pulling out of the limelight, pulling out of the director's role. And I think the franchise maybe suffered a little bit because Lucas did not want to remain right there as the central figure. And then he sold the franchise, and it went in directions that a lot of the original fans didn't even care for.
Yeah. Star Wars has a big impact on a lot of folks today, and a lot of people that I've seen are very unhappy with the direction it's gone. So yeah.
See, that's the avoider saboteur. Now, it doesn't, the lighter side of the avoider is somebody who wants to have, considers the feelings of all sides of an issue, but they don't run from conflict to the extent that they give up their values. So that's where you have to begin to draw the line with the avoider. Now,
Okay.
the third group is hypervigilant. And let me just say, we all have a little bit of all of these.
Okay.
If you really start looking at these, you'll find that different circumstances and situations will pull you into any of these roles. But usually people have 1 or 2 or 3 that they fall back on most of the time. So number 3 is those people that are hypervigilant. This is intense anxiety about and focus on what could go wrong. So our hypervigilant example is Andre Agassi. You familiar with his name, Tom?
Actually, yeah, I'm a former tennis fan.
Well, there you go. See, I mean, a lot of people know who he is, even people that don't like tennis. And the reason why is because he had such an engaging personality, but as we know, in the midst of his career, he had a massive breakdown as well. Hypervigilant people are very worried about what could go wrong, and they have a focus on what could go wrong.
Okay.
A lot of times they were raised up in an environment where it wasn't safe to make a mistake. And a lot of times they had abusive parents. So they're always looking, trying to anticipate where the next blow is coming from.
Hmm.
And this poor man, the upside of being hyper vigilant is he was detail oriented, he had a massive work ethic, and he had great skills. But what happened to him after a while was the fear of, he had gotten this exalted position in the tennis world, but the fear of losing it destroyed any sense of equilibrium and happiness that he had. And so he had drug problems, and mental health issues came from drug problems, or all that was wrapped up together.
Hmm.
And so this hypervigilance for a time destroyed the poor man. And he, again, I believe, was very public in his biography about getting help and finding his way back. And he was another one of those people, like Tiger Woods, that after the terrible fall, he found his way back into being very successful again.
We all love a comeback story, right?
Well, we do. We do, because we all probably have some of us have major falls, others of us just have smaller falls, but it's always inspiring to know that what looks like the end, if you don't quit, it's not the end. So that's an inspiration from Mr. Agassi. Now, the fourth one, and these first four are all basically about people's ways of dealing with their fears. So the fourth saboteur is called the victim. And for the victim, I wanted to talk about Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people, I mean, we still have Marilyn Monroe's movies, and everybody can appreciate what a beautiful and talented person she was. But for those of us who know anything about her life, the backstory of her life is just so tragic. It's heartbreaking. And she died, many think she committed suicide at a very young age. And it was because of this victim saboteur that left her feeling helpless and powerless. So when people live in this victim mindset, no matter what the circumstance, it's always somebody else is doing things to me and I can't do anything about it. So, especially in business, I don't know that you see this quite so much in business, because it's hard to get ahead in the first place and find any success when you're constantly blaming the circumstances for your situation. But, Marilyn was one of those people. She was very, very successful, and yet in her private life, she was absolutely tortured. And it was very, very sad that she ended her own life, if in fact she did. I guess there's some controversy about that. But this victim mindset is definitely, we were talking about win-win. Well, victims live in a lose-win mindset. They're always feeling like the loser. And so their life has no joy, because they're always feeling like circumstances are more powerful than they are.
Yeah, it is tough, and there are I've witnessed that firsthand, and I think everybody feels that once in a while. You know, uh, I know I have whenever I've been socked pretty hard and knocked to my feet, and I'm kind of like getting back up. You know, but you got to have that winner's mindset to want to get up and climb back up and do it all again. You know.
Exactly. Well, that's the problem that the victims have, is they don't have access to that winner side of themselves.
Hmm.
They have been beat down so many times, and often very early on in life. I mean, Marilyn Monroe, I believe, was given up for adoption. So she was rejected by her birth parents. And after, with a rejection like that, some people, they never see themselves as winners. They go through life with a loser story. So it makes it very difficult.
Okay. All right.
So those are the fear saboteurs: the judge, the avoider, the hypervigilant, and the victim. Now we're going to move on to the uncertainty saboteurs, people that are just, they're not sure. They never have this confident feeling of being able to get ahead. And so this constant running of doubt and uncertainty, well, not doubt, but uncertainty, not knowing, creates these other saboteurs. The first one is the controller. And we all know this the guy that I picked to be our example of being a controller, that was Steve Jobs.
Mhm. Yeah.
We know a lot about the work of Steve Jobs's work because Apple is so popular. And even if you're not an Apple guy, you know about Apple because it's always in the news. And we all know that Steve Jobs was the driving force. Him and Wozniak were the creators of Apple. And then after quite a bit of success, Jobs was asked to leave Apple by his colleagues. Now, why did that happen? Well, this controller saboteur ran the show for all those years and created so much resentment and bad will between colleagues that eventually they wanted him to go.
Hmm.
And so Jobs left there, he went to Pixar, and then his absence was so detrimental to the company that down the road, after, who knows what was said to who and when, but they invited him to come back. And I don't know if he ever really found a balance to this controller dark side. The reason why he didn't, if indeed he didn't, is because it made for such success. Because he was into everything. He was a dominator, he was into details, he had very high standards, they were uncompromising. And those things, when they don't destroy your relationships, I think they add to a company. But in his case, we were able to see that at least the first go round, it went too far until they didn't want him around anymore.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah. I've researched some of his history, and thankfully, I mean, as brilliant as he of a creator as he was, I would have had a terrible time trying to work with him. We would have, yeah, it would not have ended well for me. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I think a lot of people felt like that. And if you just try to imagine a world where he had some understanding of these saboteurs and kind of reined it in, given the heights that Apple ascended to anyway, what would have been possible if he had been able to live in this win-win mindset where you don't control people, maybe you guide and inspire, but you don't manipulate, dominate, and put a cap on their creativity.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a very interesting question. What kind of world could we have if everyone understood these saboteurs and had constructive ways of keeping them in line and started to create win-win relationships all across the board in their life?
You
Where
said
would it
something
be?
in there very interesting just now. You said basically keeping them in line, but I mean, I think it's deeper than that. I mean, what you actually were saying was being able to set boundaries.
Mm.
And that's what, and to me, that's day one, start one, is being able to do that. So yeah, that's a brilliant piece of wisdom that you brought forward there.
Thank you, Tom. What a nice compliment. Well, let me see, we're on number 6 now, is the restless. And here's another person that is so in the news. Everybody's going to know who I'm talking about. The restless saboteur is someone who is always on a quest for more and better, innovation. But they're not focused because they can be focused at times, but they're always wanting more. So instead of focusing now, they're way out there. You have want to guess, Tom, who I might be pointing to?
Well, I think you're pointing a finger towards me, but I don't know that you're that's the character that you were talking about. But yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, my worldwide known figure is Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
So Elon Musk, relentless pursuit of diverse, ambitious projects and a constant drive for innovation. I mean, that side of him is so admirable.
Mhm.
But the dark side is these people that try to work with him and try to keep up with him. This
Mhm.
is the whole reason I call these mindset saboteurs, is because whatever if these qualities go off the rails, you cannot work with these people. They say he works 100 hours a week.
Hmm.
Supposedly, I mean, he has a wife. I believe he has children.
Hmm.
Where do they fit into 100 hours a week?
Yeah, I've been there, and there's not a lot of time left. But yeah, yeah, it's definitely not easy, right?
Right. It's not easy. And it's not easy for people that love them, which is heartbreaking because when you love somebody, you don't want that for them. You want a better life for them than to always be without you.
Yeah, you get married to your work is what you're. That's what those types, and I have to fight that myself because
Yeah.
it's easy for me to get married to my work. So
Okay. Well, I've got my
I've been there.
own. I'm going to be checking back with you and we'll see. Okay, so number 7 is the stickler. Now, these are all really famous people, but I just love how there's such famous people fit into these. Sticklers are perfectionists.
Mm.
They like order, but they're off the rails because they go past, a really good thing and they go for this perfection and then they become rigid and uncompromising. And
Mm.
also can never please them because they can always see something better. So my example is Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart had a very successful brand, and she did it by having such high standards of beauty and perfection in her recipes and her decorating and then she had all these white label, products that got her name on them. And that all looked really good. And then somehow this insider trading thing got put into the mix. And we found her somewhat unapologetic. She went to prison. What did she do in prison? She taught the very same things in prison that she had been teaching on her television show, and she taught it to inmates. And that, I don't know, I thought that personally said a lot for her because she didn't sit around being angry and bitter. She did
Mhm.
something constructive with her time and gave something to other people. But when she came back out, these same standards of perfectionism and uh, uncompromising areas, I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess the votes aren't in on her future yet. But we do know that she did not let her time in jail destroy her.
Yeah.
She came right back out and got in the mix.
Mm.
Our last three are the mindsets that we develop to deal with doubt, doubting ourselves mostly. So the first is hyperachiever. And my hyperachiever is Michael Jordan.
Mm.
Now, do you see why you could probably tell me why we would have Michael Jordan associated with hyperachieving.
Well, yeah, yeah, he was always, to my knowledge, he was always in it, and so yeah.
One thing I didn't think we had time for, but I have extracted quotes from all these people, but I want to read you Michael Jordan's quote because it is so telling. And you may have heard this. It's pretty widely known. Michael Jordan said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed."
Mm.
So
I have
this is
not heard that, but that's beautiful.
it's an interesting idea that his failures, I mean, the man's counted his failures, right? He's got the numbers right on it at whatever day this was that he said this. He knew exactly what his numbers were. But what makes him a hyperachiever is that did not stop him. That actually fueled his success.
Hmm.
And this is an area where we could all maybe go a little more in Michael Jordan's direction. I know for myself, I was raised in an environment where failure was not an option. So you did not do things. This is where the doubt has been, this is one of my definite shadows is the doubt. If I have doubts, I don't want to take action. Michael Jordan used his doubts to fuel action.
Yeah.
He has maybe the dark side, but I think he made more the light side of his. I don't even know if it's so much a saboteur, except that I'm not sure how much he's been able to enjoy his success. You kind of get the impression that, at least in terms of basketball, the guy was just always shooting hoops. And to the extent that he enjoyed that, I guess it was good. But, after 1,000 shots in a day, let's go do something else, You know what I mean, Tom?
Yeah, I understand. But I also understand that, it takes a lot to get good at what you're doing. And so, yeah, that's interesting that about the dark side of hyper competitiveness. I'm sure that cancels out a lot of friendships that you could have.
Well, I don't know if you watched that amazing documentary that they did about his life on Netflix. If you haven't, you might be interested. But he didn't have all the best relationships with a lot of his teammates because they just couldn't keep up with his work ethic. And apparently he wasn't shy about telling people they weren't working hard enough. So it didn't always make for the best relationships with the team.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, that might have been one of those win-lose scenarios where he could have enjoyed it more if he had maybe been a little more forgiving of people's humanity, because he was such a superman, and not all of us could keep up with that kind of work ethic or those standards.
Interesting point of view. So, yeah.
So number 9, we're almost to 10. Number 9 is hyper rational. Now, our hyper rational guy is another person. Everybody knows his name, Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay.
Now, maybe you know why I would call Mark Zuckerberg a hyper rational guy. They're characterized by being highly rational, logical, data-driven, methodical, strategic, focused on efficiency, practicality, and then the darkest part, cold and detached. Right? So I saw the Facebook movie, and when he kind of just jettisoned that guy that had helped him create Facebook, that was cold, man. That was cold.
Yeah,
And
understood.
and the whole privacy issue with Facebook, I mean, all our little private things, apparently if you have the right access in Facebook, you can find out just about anything about anybody, and that's kind of a scary thing. But regardless of what we all think about that, hyper rational people, they do not temper their decision making with any sort of emotion, compassion, mercy. No, it's a numbers decision, period, the end. If the numbers go against you, you're out.
That's very interesting.
And our last saboteur, doubt saboteur, is the pleaser. And again, this is one that I have to own. Being raised up in the environment where I was in is like my dad's standards were so high, and if I brought home an A, he wanted to know why it wasn't an A plus. And this was very discouraging to a little girl who worked pretty hard. It's like you could never do enough. But I developed this mindset of I have to make my dad happy. If he was happy with me, it was like the sun was out. If he was unhappy with me, it was like a rainy day, and it could be rainy for days on end. If my dad wasn't happy, he wasn't necessarily going to thaw out for a while. He had a real punishing side. And when I was looking for pleasers, a lot of these entertainers, such as Whitney Houston, came up because, like Whitney Houston, this woman had everything. She was beautiful, she was talented, she was successful. Whether you liked him or not, she was married, she had a child, and yet this woman She had everything, and yet she was unable to be happy with who she was. And cocaine just ruined her life. So this is what happens to pleasers that cannot find something to love within themselves, who are always giving themselves away, over giving, and then resenting other people because they give not freely out of the fullness of who they are. They give out of the feeling of lack, hoping that you'll drop a few crumbs of kindness or affection their way. And this creates terrible relationships. Pleasers never feel loved for who they are. They feel like they have to keep giving, giving, giving. Even when their own well is gone dry, they're still trying to give, hoping for a few crumbs to come back.
Wow.
So it's a pretty sad
deep.
state of affairs.
That's very deep.
So, Tom, this is the kind of saboteur mindsets that if we can really begin to watch these things as they show up in our lives and our dealings with other people, and bring ourselves back to the center. I have lots of tools in my toolbox for helping people work on these mindsets and come back into an aligned and balanced way of being. Then we can begin to create win-win relationships that will make our lives happier and more joyful, and our businesses more successful.
Wow.
Who doesn't want that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I definitely know that I guess I've got some homework to do. So tell our listeners how that they can get a hold of you, and we'll put the links and stuff down under the show notes. But if someone wants to reach out to you immediately while they're on this podcast, how would that be?
Well, you probably can't see it very well, but I created a little infographic of all the saboteurs. And if your listeners would like to download that for absolutely no charge at all, they can just go to my website, kristinvantilburg.com, and then /10, 10 for 10 saboteurs. Okay. So that's a way to find me, find my website, find out more information about these saboteurs, and also about all the work that I do for someone who wants to take it the next step.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate it. So, Kristen, usually toward the end of our podcast, which we've really enjoyed our time here together with you, I'm going to give you the last word. So, give the listener something to take home with them.
Okay. Well, friends, what I want to encourage you to do this year is focus on this win-win strategy in your personal life and in your business life. We all know that there's plenty of darkness out there in the world to be concerned about, and there's much uncertainty, a lot of chaos, a lot of structures are crumbling that are no longer serving people. But if we each, in our own way, take to heart the idea that we can create a win-win corner of the world, our little corner of the world, if enough of us start to live in a win-win environment, I think that we will be doing the most that we can to help our world to come through this dark time back out into the light.
Absolutely. And with that, we thank you, Kristen. And listeners, all the links and everything to Kristen's website will be placed on the description. So we thank you. And Kristen, thanks again.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to Morning Joe with Tom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. See you next time for more real-life stories and inspiration on Morning Joe with Tom.